Welcome to You're Hired. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get going, I want to thank my amazing production engineer, Afotey Odai. Afotey spends a lot of time editing these shows. I know you're listening to it at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, but we've recorded this at a previous date because all of our guests are busy at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. So Afotey spends hours and hours and hours in the studio working hard to make me sound good. And our production assistant, Alex Pascasello, who is in high school. Alex makes sure that our guests are well prepared. So thank you guys, and thank you to WERA for giving us this wonderful studio to share our work in. If you don't know, You're Hired Radio, our mission is to support people in having joyful jobs and satisfying careers. And we have guests on that talk about issues ranging from workplace harassment to the new overtime rules to today, bringing former felons back into the workplace. This is an important issue for you, even if you're not a felon. And I'll tell you why. So, as I was saying earlier, the United States has between 12 and 14 million ex-offenders of working age. That's a lot of people. So in GDP terms, this reduction in employment because of the folks having a hard time getting back into the workforce is between $57 and $65 billion in lost output. That is a lot of money. That's a lot of money that's not supporting the tax base. And so what we can do to help that is really important. I'm going to read some other things. So in 2008, about 1 in 33 working age adults was an ex-prisoner. And about 1 in 15 working age adults was an ex-felon. About 1 in 17 adult men of working age was an ex-prisoner, and about 1 in 8 was an ex-felon. And there's an extensive body of research that has established that a felony conviction or time in prison makes individuals significantly less employable. And here's why. It's not simply that individuals who commit crimes are less likely to work in the first place, but rather that felony convictions or time spent in prison act independently to lower the employment prospects of ex-offenders. Since over 90% of ex-offenders are men, the effect on the male employment rate was much higher, with ex-offenders lowering employment rates for men by 1.5 to 1.7 percentage points. Another thing I thought was interesting, about 18% of eligible prisoners held in federal prisons are employed by Unicor and are paid less than $1.25 an hour. That's not much money, but it's just an interesting fact. Prisoners have gradually become a source of low-wage labor for corporations seeking to outsource work to inmates. Corporations that utilize prison labor, that's today, are companies like Walmart, Eddie Bauer's, Victoria's Secrets, Microsoft, Starbucks, McDonald's, Nintendo, Chevron Corporation, Bank of America, Koch Industries, Boeing, Costco Wholesale. I mean, some of these employers are really well-known brands. I think it's important that everyone have the opportunity to work at their maximum. It's good for the economy. It's good for our society as a whole. And the reason we're doing this show is because I want to see how we can support folks who have been in prison. They've done their time, and I'm not dinging prisons, but the system or the societal situation that keeps people who've gotten out of prison from moving on in their lives. And we also have with us today a special guest. So let me introduce our guests, because we have three: Elizabeth Jones Valderrama, Rob Krupicka, and Adryann Glenn. And Elizabeth Jones is the executive director of Offender Aid and Restoration of Arlington, Alexandria, and Falls Church. Elizabeth has been an integral part of this organization for more than 11 years in various positions. She was born in Costa Rica and moved to Arlington at the age of 9. She earned her bachelor's from the University of Virginia and a master's degree from the University of Phoenix, and was honored in 2014 as one of the 40 emerging community leaders under 40 in Arlington County. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And also we have us with today was Rob Krupicka. Am I spelling that Krupicka?
That's right.
Rob Krupicka.
You got it.
Awesome. Is a former state delegate for Virginia's 45th District, a passionate advocate for universal early childhood education, and an avid distance and trail runner. He strongly believes in the vital economic role of small businesses, and his donut shop, Sugar Shack, proves this point well. As the owner of Sugar Shack Donuts, he hopes his shop will be a cherished family gathering place and supportive community partner for its neighbors and the region. And what folks may or may not know is that Rob hires people who were felons.
That's right.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming to the show, Rob.
Thank you.
And where are the donuts?
I know, where are the donuts?
We were giving Rob a hard time for not bringing us donuts. And on the phone with us, we have Adryann Glenn. Adryann, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you guys doing?
So Adryann comes to us through Elizabeth. Elizabeth, would you like to introduce Adryann?
Absolutely. So Adryann is a fantastic person, as you will hear today when he speaks at your show. He was a prior participant of OAR, so someone who came to OAR after having a record, and he is one of our outstanding clients, and I'm excited for you all to learn about him because he's got a unique story and he is looking for work, so that's even better.
Wonderful. So why don't you start us off, Elizabeth, and tell us what does the Offender Aid and Restoration of Arlington, Alexandria, and Falls Church do?
Absolutely. So we go by OAR for short, and we've been around since 1974, and we really, primarily the work that we're doing is working with individuals who are coming out of incarceration pre and post release so that they can be successful in their reentry. We also run the court-mandated community service program from Arlington County and City of Falls Church courts. So that's when the judge would say, in lieu of going to incarceration, do some hours with OAR. So we have wraparound services for individuals who have misdemeanors, felonies, who have family members who are in that predicament. And so we do lots of different work, both pre and post release.
So what are some of the things that you guys do? So if I'm a client, what would my experience be?
Yeah, so we pride ourselves on having a very unique experience for each individual person. So everyone has their own gifts and strengths and needs. So we do an intake, of course, and determine some of the different things. So a menu of options would be employment assistance. We work on case management, intensive or otherwise. We have emergency services, so someone who's in need of home or transportation or clothing. We also have more intense case management services, specifically working on cognitive behavioral cognition, so thinking and behavioral issues, so that our folks can stay home and be successful.
So primarily your job is to make that bridge from people coming out of a prison and into the workplace.
Yes, and so we work with both jails and prisons as well as with the courts.
So for folks who don't know, and I've learned this just recently, jails are what you go into when you're kind of in the initial stages of if you've been arrested, and a prison is where you serve a sentence.
Yes. In addition to that, jails are also, if you're serving a sentence that's a year or less, you stay in a jail setting.
A year or less, right. Okay.
Yeah, or awaiting trial or in the arrest process. So that is the jail setting, and then prison is everything else. So we work with both of those institutions as well as the courts. And we hope to be a bridge and be on the journey with individuals who are coming out so that they have the support that they need. So there's a lot of folks who come out that don't actually have supportive families and supportive networks. And so we hope to be those new family, friends, and et cetera.
And who funds you?
So we are funded by a variety of people. We have, of course, individual donors. We have faith communities, civic associations. We have an incredible supportive system from Arlington County government and Alexandria City government. And then, of course, we do grants from different foundations and the state of Virginia.
So a mix, some tax dollars and some...
That's right.
Private contributions. Mm-hmm. That's great. And we're going to talk more about what you do. And Rob, tell us how you fit into this, because you're a business owner.
Business owner, former elected official. Mm-hmm. When I was a state delegate, I actually carried a bill to ban the box in Virginia, which essentially means when the state hires people, they would no longer ask a question whether or not you've got a prison background.
And let me just tell people, so ban the box on employment applications. Historically, there's been a box, and the question would read something like, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And then you check that box, and you may have to give some more information. There's been a big push amongst a lot of people nationally to get rid of this box question. So ban the box is what we're talking about.
That's right. And that ultimately was successful. The governor, after a lot of requests that started really with my office, but lots of other people participating, over about 18 months, he finally came to the conclusion he could do it himself, and he banned the box unilaterally for all state applications.
And when was this?
This happened a year and a half ago?
Yes, for the state applications.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So very recently. But my experience with that and talking to the ex-offenders and talking to the advocacy groups like OAR and folks providing services like OAR and others led me to realize that when I started my own business, I wanted to make sure we were practicing what we preached. And we started out of the box hiring ex-offenders. We worked with a group in Alexandria called Together We Bake, which takes female ex-offenders and trains them to work in a kitchen. We hired a large number of Together We Bake graduates, continue to do that today. They're some of our more stable and long-term employees, actually. And it's been very successful for us. You know, you would not know the difference between an employee in my kitchen who has worked, gone through a program like OAR or Together We Bake with some kind of background and someone who hasn't. There's really no way to differentiate between them. They all perform good or bad, in a way that, it kind of is separate from all of that. And we've been really happy with the choice we made not to check that application box.
And how many employees do you have?
I have about 50 between my Alexandria store and my Arlington store. I don't know the exact number that have a background because we don't ask, and I don't keep a file of it. So I know I have a good number. And
would you say more than half?
It's probably in the half range, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Could be more, but like I said, I don't keep a record of it. I'm pretty happy I don't keep a record of it. What we do keep a record of is when employees, while they're working for us, commit crimes, because there's only so much tolerance we can have for them to continue to behave in an inappropriate way. But as long as they don't do something while they're working with us, I likely will never know, unless they are an advocate, like they're working with OAR, Together We Bake, in a more outward-facing way, promoting the fact that they're kind of a good success story.
That's really interesting. So you have employees, and unfortunately, they may commit another felony or misdemeanor. Sometimes
they might, and sometimes it could be someone who didn't commit anything before at all. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the workforce. I mean, I may hire someone who makes a mistake, and sometimes it's a significant mistake and sometimes it's not. But that's part of managing a business that has a lot of staff, and that's just part of the nature of work.
Sure. And do you have a tolerance? If I'm just curious, because you're a business owner, if somebody does something bad, do you keep them? Is there like a threshold of what we'll tolerate and what we won't?
It depends on what it is. For example, if there's something that involves violence or we don't have any patience for that.
That's a non-starter.
One of our employees had a case with trespassing about a year ago, and had to basically serve a 30-day sentence for it. It was a short-term sentence for it. And because he was such a good guy and a good worker, and we also felt that in his particular case, the circumstances were not significant or serious, we held his job for him, and he came back and became one of our strongest kitchen employees because he knew we cared about him enough to give him a chance.
So let's start at the beginning with what's the problem? Right? I kind of discussed it a little bit, but you're both at the front lines. Elizabeth, tell me what the problem is here for us as a society around this.
Well, I think there's an incredible amount of bias and concern for individuals when you tell someone that you are, whatever term you're using, ex-offender or returning citizen or someone who's come out of incarceration. I think people have a tendency of getting that concerned look. Even when we were talking about the show, we talked about, individuals who have substantial years that are incarcerated and being concerned about folks who have been away for 18 years. So if you can imagine being away for 18 years and having to come back to look for a job, when you disclose that to someone who's potentially going to hire you, that person might get a little nervous about it, and I think the reality is that we don't, that individuals might not see themselves in the eyes of, or identify with that person. If you think about who was I 18 years ago, I'm a totally different person today. And so that's part of it. And, we're, this area specifically, we're in the DC metro area, you have an incredible amount of highly educated individuals who are looking for work who have no record whatsoever. And so I think in terms of an employer, there's this sense of why would I give an opportunity to an individual who does have a record when there's, thousands of others who might be available to me that don't. So that is another piece as well. But what I have learned from the employers who do hire individuals and really provide the support like Rob is talking about, that they're incredibly loyal once you have done that, because you're providing opportunities that many other employers employers have have closed the door. We've had an individual who applied to 35 different jobs and got one interview because they did still have the box. So the box is only for state and local government employees, not for regular businesses. And so that's demoralizing, and that's really sad for the individual who has an incredible amount of gifts and amount of skills to provide that employer.
And do you think that folks are more loyal and maybe better employees because there's a certain sense of like, oh man, I've got no place else to turn. Someone who gives me a break, I am really going to appreciate them.
I think that plays into it, absolutely. I think some of the folks that we work with, once they have a job, we still provide some additional support services. So you're looking at someone who still might have a probation officer, for example, which means that they have to do screenings for drugs and all of that. So you already have a reassurance for the most part that the person's actually doing what they're supposed to do. And then you have case management support on the back end, like the work that we do, so that if somebody runs into a situation with, my car is, I'm having an issue with my car, I'm having an issue with housing, you have a team of individuals who are actually going to be able to support that individual in their process.
So is there if I hire an ex-offender, do I partner with you and tell you, and do we talk about this person together or behind their backs? How does that work? I mean,
so it depends. So if the employer comes to us, so for example, if you were to call me and say, hey, I have these openings, I'm looking to hire, then you already know that person is working with us directly. Otherwise, you wouldn't necessarily know unless the individual says to you, not only do I have a record, this is what I've done since the record, and this is who I really am, but I'm also working with OAR. And so that's a whole other element. So for employers who do come through us and connect with us, we have a waiver that's signed, and the individual actually knows that we're talking about with them, that we're on the journey with them. And that
but is the employer
knows.
Involved? Like, are we talking to the parole officer? Are we talking to you, like, about some of their personal stuff?
I think it just, for the most part, it depends on the needs of the employer. So if an employer, we've had cases where someone's needed additional housing, and that was the only barrier that they had to come in to work, and so we've stepped in to be able to support. I think it just depends on the case by case. Most employers know that we're available to them if they individually and the person's not able to work out on their issue, and that we can come in to support. And for the most part, the actual participant comes to us and says, hey, I need housing or I need transportation. The employer doesn't, but we are available to the employer if that's something that is agreed upon at the beginning of the conversation.
So I think I'd be remiss not to bring Adryann into the conversation now, because Adryann has a history of having been in prison. Mm-hmm. Adryann, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us. So do you want to share your story about kind of like your previous experiences in life and incarceration and up to this point?
Well, I was released from prison on November 2013. I spent 4 years in the Virginia Department of Corrections. Prior to that, I had some scuffles with the law. I'd been to jail. I actually caught my first charge in 1993 when I was 14. But, it's kind of a progressional thing. 16 years later, like I said, I found myself in prison. During my time away, I decided I was going to come home, be productive, and just, go the square and honest route. I wrote a book while I was away. It was published about a month after I was released. Maybe about 2 months after that, there was a job opportunity through another OAR client who had started their own business. So I started helping with the landscaping, as well as Mayor Ewell was having this congressional campaign, and I got hired on to work in the phone bank. But within about a month or so, I was actually helping plan events and like walking with him as he went places. I was kind of like an assistant to him rather than just a phone bank guy, because once I had a chance to prove myself, it was like, hey, this guy is okay. After that, I cut a little bit of hair. For the last year, I've been working at the Clemency Project 2014. Not sure if everybody that's listening is aware. That's the initiative by President Obama to try to get nonviolent first-time drug offenders out of prison by commuting their sentences. Great experience, awesome. Contract ran out, but I learned a lot, met a lot of great people. Currently looking for employment. I'm educated. I know what I'm doing, but for some reason or another, when people look at my past, what I'm doing now has nothing to do with it. They just completely look past all of that. But consider that I committed my crimes when I was 28, 29. I'm 37 now. Totally different individual, but people don't take that into account.
So tell us about your book, Adryann. That's really interesting. What's the title?
Okay, well, there's 2 books now. The other one dropped about 3 months ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Just 2. The first one is Job 32:18. It's available on Amazon. The second one is Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 9. Also available on Amazon. I wrote them while I was away in prison. They pretty much go through my years while I was away in my spiritual enlightenment, because not to offend anyone, But I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. That comes first in my life, so I always keep him out front. And it's just a book about the lessons I learned and ways to share the word in a practical manner to people. It's cool to go to church and pray and say, I love the Lord, but it's a totally different thing when you're sitting in traffic and that guy cuts you off. It's different when you're in the grocery store and you're trying to get in line and you know this is a 10-item line and that person has 15 items. Like, how do you hold your spirit then? How do you carry on? That's pretty much all they're about, just practical Christian literature.
So, Adryann, the question I posed earlier to Elizabeth is, it seems like folks who were offenders are much more loyal and more committed to their employers. And I made the assertion that, they're just grateful, so grateful and appreciative. What can you say about that?
I agree with that statement. It's hard for us to find employment. It's very, very hard. So another thing that kind of comes with the going away to prison or going to jail is you learn about loyalty and integrity. And when people put themselves out there for you, then you feel indebted to put yourself out there for them. So if someone gives you an opportunity, you take advantage of it. You don't let them down. Even if you have another job offer that might be better, it's like, but you know what? When I didn't have anything, this person stood beside me. So I'll stand beside them. It's just the natural nature of somebody that's been through that progression in life. When you go to prison, you don't make a lot of friends, but you make a couple of family members, about 3 or 4 guys that you really get close to, and they become like family, so you're loyal to them. They have a job on the compound you don't have, and they look out for you. You look out for them. That's just the way it becomes ingrained in you. So when you come home and somebody gives you an opportunity to work a job, whether it be for what you're worth or what you're not worth, the mere fact they're giving you a chance to put food on the table, to take care of your family and feel productive, rather than on the bus every day, walking around all the time, not doing anything, you're just extremely, grateful, like you were saying, for what they've done, and you feel as though you owe them a chance to, do everything you can for them and help them to build their business. You want to become a significant part of their business because if they've taken that chance and you show them what you can do, they have no problem moving you forward in the business, teaching you different things, raising your pay, and you're also putting yourself in a position where other people coming home, because that's the biggest thing with people that get out. We want to put ourselves in a position that when other people that we know come home, we can assist them. And if I come home and I don't do the right thing, and my friend comes home, but he goes to the same place I was working at, they're not going to give him a job because I'm stuck. So we look at it like that.
So, Rob, let me ask you, as a business guy, what are some of the challenges I'm going to be facing hiring someone who was a felon?
Some of the challenges are just kind of basic paperwork. There can sometimes be paperwork that goes along with hiring someone with a record.
Like what?
And some of it's also not, some of this paperwork's not restricted to people with records, but there's more likely they have garnishments that you have to deal with where there's money being taken out of their paycheck every pay cycle. They may have child care payments that you have to deal with. Again, there's people who without prison backgrounds who have child care issues as well. But anyway, there's some administrative HR costs in terms of time and resources. It's not bad. It surprised us when we first got it because we just hadn't been prepared for it, but we've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's pretty matter of course for us. Other things that we have had to prepare for are the same things we've prepared for with every employee, which is they certainly have to learn the skills to make our handmade donuts. They've got to learn how to be team members, and sometimes some people are better at that than others, and a criminal background doesn't have any effect on whether or not they are. In my experience, people can be bad team members regardless of whether they have a background. They've got to learn how to be punctual. I mean, we hire folks who often, regardless of whether they've got a criminal background, they've had some knocks in life, and they need a chance to figure out how they operate in a workplace where you have to show up on time and be punctual and be a good team member. And those are the issues that we deal with the most. The criminal background stuff never comes into it.
What are some of the cultural values that your organization has? And when I say cultural values, I mean the people that do work there. What do you think they value? And how does that translate? How do they collectively have a value? What are those? So
from my standpoint, I want to have really low employee turnover. If I'm not doing my job right, if I have high employee turnover. And we've done a really good job of keeping people. And the only reason someone should leave if the world is perfect is if they've moved on to a better, higher paying, more important job. We still have to let people go sometimes who just don't make the cut in terms of teamwork and all the things I just said. But, that's kind of where we start. And I think the employees there know that we tend to be open communication kind of place. People know they can tell me what's going on, and if they have issues, they can let me know, and there won't be repercussions for it. I try hard to encourage that. I think it's really important. We try to be a place where everyone looks out for each other, and people know that even if you've gotten your job done today, you need to help your friend get his or her job done too, because sometimes the shoe's going to be on the other foot and you'll need help with your stuff. So we try to foster a lot of that kind of teamwork. And we sell donuts, and they're really good donuts. And, our job is to make customers happy. So we really encourage people to smile and be nice and be friendly to each other and to customers coming in the door. When we first opened, we had more complaints than I would like about the attitude coming from some of the staff. And we figured out that there were a couple bad apples that were kind of making it not good for everyone else. And once we figured out who those bad apples were and kind of help them move on to something else or find a different role that doesn't involve working with customers as directly, all that went away. And the thing I'm most proud of is we get raves every day from customers about how great our employees are. Every day. I tell the employees, our product could be terrible. And because you guys get such great compliments from people, they'll keep coming back. I mean, we fortunately have a good product too, but it's important for folks to treat people with respect. And I think my staff does a good job of that.
And Elizabeth, I'd ask you, what are some of the challenges as an employer? Because we've got a lot of folks who are listening who are employers and have small businesses here in Arlington and might be interested in hiring people who are super loyal and will reduce their turnover, because every business doesn't want high turnover, right? That costs money. It costs money to hire and recruit. It costs money to train. You want to keep those people and keep them good. What are some of the challenges?
I think Rob kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the other piece too is that OAR also hires folks who are coming out of incarceration, so I can also speak from the employer's perspective as well. We practice what we preach. Definitely the challenges of someone who doesn't have a support group or a support network, I think, is the biggest piece. And so things like, I was living with a person and my loved one, and somehow I'm not able to live there anymore. So there's that, or my car broke down, right? And so now I can't get to work. So I think there's some of those systems that need to be in place for individuals who might that would be successful if they continued to work there, if they had those pieces. So those are different ones. And I think, some of the things that Rob was talking about in terms of the life skills piece. And so we do a lot of work in the life skills piece as well, the soft skills, but also just in general, how to have a conversation about what your charge was, where you were and where you are today. And I think the employers who are open-minded and able to allow a person to share their story will likely have a better turnout with someone when they're hired, because they will have that connection that Rob was mentioning. And we'll be able to come in and say, I need some additional support in this area. That oftentimes doesn't cost the employer anything other than a 5 to 10 minute conversation. Yeah,
so that's great. I'm really glad you mentioned that. So Adryann and I were talking a week or so ago, and Adryann was sharing quite freely his story. And Adryann, one of the things you said was that you feel comfortable sharing it. Can you say more about your sharing and what that experience has meant for you?
Well, yeah, I have no problem sharing my story. Just a little piece. I feel like it's necessary for us that are being released to share our stories so you can get a human look at it. Stop looking at it like a number or statistics or what the media is feeding you, and get to know us personally, because we're just human beings who made mistakes. That's all. I was locked up for unlawful wounding as well as possession of cocaine. I have a prior felony for unlawful wounding. If you're not familiar with the laws in Virginia, unlawful wounding is a Class 6 felony. It's the lowest felony you can get. It's usually when the Commonwealth attorney would rather charge you with the felony than the misdemeanor 1, assault and battery. So I have 2 of those. Nothing super crazy. My possession of cocaine charge is for 1.5 grams of cocaine. They tried to make a possession with intent to distribute. When you actually look at people's charges and get to know those people, it's the nature of the judicial system to try to penalize you for the greatest crime they can, whether or not you committed the crime that was that great of an atrocity. And in my case, that was just it. I had a long run. I'm not going to lie. I started selling illicit drugs when I was 11 years old. And from 11 to 30, that's what I did. But the purpose was I wanted to go to college. My mother and father didn't have a lot of money. So in order for me to pay for college at 11 years old, there's not a lot of options. I'm not saying I didn't work jobs in high school or jobs when I got out of college, because I definitely did. It just got to a point where economically that income was something I could depend on. I knew it wasn't going anywhere. Whether somebody went, because I got my first felony when I was a sophomore in my junior year of college. So I'm doing all this work trying to go to school and make me a felon. And I know what that means. I know that's a life sentence. And most people don't realize that. But when you're convicted of a felony, it's a life sentence. It never leaves. It's always going to be there. True, most background checks are 5 years to 7 years. But then you got those people who ask on the box, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Not when were you convicted of a crime, but have you ever been? And you have to tell the truth, because if you don't tell the truth, two things can happen. One, you can be charged. And two, they can sue you for the back pay because you took the job under false pretenses. And I don't have any time for that. I'm not going back to jail. I'm not doing anything else illegal. I want to thank Mr. Krupicka, though, because when I first came home with OAR's advocacy group, he actually arranged for us to go down to Richmond to meet the General Assembly and actually see how this, the laws, it takes place, the actual process of it. And that was awesome. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. In fact, everything I'm doing now is kind of in a slant to get into policy work, because without the change of policy, there's not going to be a change in the minds of, your average everyday American. They're always going to look at felons the way that, the TV portrays this. But most people that are incarcerated, most people that are coming home, you got a lot of people with addiction issues, other people with mental health issues, and that makes up the vast majority of your people that are incarcerated. There's a very small percentage of them that are actually like these hardened criminals, and that's all they're going to do. And the rest of them are just disenfranchised. They don't see any other option. For instance, you come home from prison. I'm 37 years old, right? This is Northern Virginia. There's a certain amount of money you have to make just to be able to live, a living wage. And that's not what guys are coming home to. I know guys that have come home and they're making $8.25 an hour, working 20 hours a week, and they have 4 children. What can you do with $160 a week with 4 children? Nothing. So he's kind of, pushed into a place where what else am I going to do but, reoffend? Whereas if the community as a whole, and I'm talking about private organizations, some of these big corporations started opening their doors and giving guys an opportunity, they would be amazed. But as for me, I've been blessed my whole time I've been home. OAR has done a lot for me, opened a lot of doors, had the opportunity to do a TEDx talk. I've been on numerous panels, but it's always about this issue because it's that important. Because America itself is missing out on a great workforce, some of the greatest workers they could ever have, some of the most intelligent people they could ever have, all because you're worried about a criminal background. A lot of us do things when we're 20 years old we wouldn't do when we're 24. So how come a person that commits a crime at 20, when they're 42 years old, they're still being judged by the actions of a 20-year-old? And that's essentially what's occurring. You're not judging me off of who I am today, but who I was in the past. I did my time. I paid my fines, yet I'm still being penalized. I'm still doing time. I often say that you really don't start doing your time until you come home, because you don't realize how many things have been taken from you because of your conviction.
So, Adryann, you make a couple of really good points. It sounds like, in a nutshell, this is a poverty issue. This is a healthcare issue. This is an education issue, not a criminal issue. I want to read something to you. So the rise in the ex-offender population, and we can assume that rise is also the rise in people who are getting arrested, and the resulting employment and output losses overwhelmingly reflect changes in the U.S. criminal justice system, not changes in underlying criminal activity. Instead, dramatic increases in sentencing, especially for drug-related offenses, account for the mushrooming of the ex-offender population that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Well, absolutely. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with this whole launch of the war on drugs. And we discovered that the war on drugs really wasn't about the drugs. It was really about a war on people and on communities, and particularly communities of color. So it absolutely is the case. We have a lot of policing that goes on I think Adryann mentioned, the concept of cocaine. There were rules back in the day, or laws back in the day, and some of them still remain, the differentiating between the cocaine drug as opposed to crack cocaine, and making the penalties for one higher than the other. Also, in the past with the whole concept of marijuana, when marijuana was something that was being used by communities of color, people began policing that excessively. And yet when we went into college campuses and it was people who were not of color using it, all of a sudden we wanted to change the laws about how we handled marijuana. So the reality is that the war on drug has caused incredible damages to communities and most of those are communities of color. So yes, the sentencing makes a big difference. Sometimes sentencing someone specifically who's holding or carrying drugs for their own personal use is more than someone, committing other more difficult crimes to the community. So one of the things I always want to, tell the community is, are we sentencing people because we don't like them or because they are actually doing something that is terrible for the community? So differentiating between that is really important.
So obviously the best case would be to change the laws.
Right.
To have them make sense.
Yes.
But even before that would be to provide education, provide opportunities so that, that a guy like Adryann knows that if he wants to go to college, he should go to college. My feeling is that if anybody wants an education, they can get as much education as they can. My father, who was a teacher for 30 years, got a free education all the way through graduate school. In the city of New York, CCNY was virtually free. You had to pay for books. And he had a great career. And that was what was available then. And now it's not available. And now we have all this poverty. It's kind of... clearly there is a connection between these things. So I want to talk more about, the upside, right? So what are some of the benefits to a business? Obviously you have a business Rob has a business who has a lot of different people. Do you notice anything? Because you've had other businesses, I'm guessing, or you've worked at other places.
I've worked at other places.
Yeah, you've worked at other places. So is there any difference in the culture that you notice between these, when you have this population of people who have been in prison?
So I don't think it actually changes the culture because I think you have a lot of choice in terms of what the culture of your business is. So we've made choices to make sure our business has certain values and principles, and I think we're doing a good job of getting there, and you always want to make a little bit more progress. I do think we want to be a very community-minded place. I believe that any business should be tied to the community they're in and should be giving back to the place that they are. So we work with lots of nonprofits, but we also make, by hiring ex-offenders, we try to make our own play our own role in ensuring people are less likely to go back to prison. Because we know folks who can't find jobs and are out looking for things ultimately get to that brick wall where they don't feel like they have a choice, and then they make a mistake. And then they go back, and when you go back again, it's never as good as the first time. And the first time usually wasn't great. So I think by helping reduce that rate of recidivism in my community, we're having a pretty significant impact on the place we operate our business, where we live, and I think that's really important.
Less crime is less crime that could happen to your business.
Less crime is less crime for all of us. That's exactly right. I think we also have an influence on the kids in the community who see us doing this, who see us giving jobs to their dads and their moms, and I think that has a powerful impact on those kids, recognizing that they can have a chance to kind of do more, and they see their mom and dad doing well, and they're proud of that. And I think that all has a ripple effect as well. So we want to be community minded every place we are, and I think this is just one piece of it for us, but it's certainly a very important one.
So I want to address something kind of globally. We had a show on military transitions not too long ago, and one of our participants was a transitioning Marine Corps officer. We ended up getting him a job, which he started just yesterday, just in the last week. So it was yesterday, but that's really cool. Right, we like that. And I think that there's a culture in our country of helping veterans. In fact, veterans' unemployment is at 4.3%. It's very low relative to the rest of the country. And I think people all kind of agree, let's help the vets get hired. The federal government gives extra points to people who are veterans. I, as a consumer, kind of like how I can see what's in the ingredients of the food that I buy, I'd love to see what the mix is of your hiring. Now, wouldn't it be great if you could have a little sticker on the side of your window saying, we hire vets or we hire former convicts? That might make me feel good. Like I might go to that business versus another business that didn't.
So we certainly aren't shy about promoting the fact that we do it. And we do hire vets sometimes too. But I will share a story. When we kind of a few months into first opening, we had a customer come in who knew we hired ex-offenders who actually made some really disparaging comments about the fact that we did that and about her willingness to frequent us as a place of business because it made her feel unsafe. We have lots of families with kids coming into our place, and in her view, the fact that we did that meant we weren't an acceptable place for her to bring her child. That's only happened once, and it's certainly not something that we spend time worrying about. But it does go to kind of why this radio show is important and this larger conversation and the work OAR does is important, is folks need to recognize that maybe whatever makes them uncomfortable about being around ex-offenders is most of the time not worth the effort. But there are people out there that are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, in the 50s and 60s, the same thing would have been said if there was an African-American person behind the cashier. Mm-hmm. Right? Or later on, someone who is, gay or transsexual or, people just don't dig what they don't get. Right?
That's right.
And when you get it, it ain't a big deal. Mm-hmm. People are people.
Mm-hmm. We often, I have to say that employers like Rob are actually not very common. So even though we're an extremely progressive community, we often get employers who say they don't want to hire people who are coming in incarceration. That's just not they're just not going to do that. And they worry about their customers saying, I'm not going to come in because I'm concerned about that or et cetera. And so it's really not that. We also have employers who in community organizations who support us and would like to remain anonymous because they don't want to be associated necessarily with, so in their hearts, they think this is important, but they also are running a business and they want to make, obviously money.
Yeah.
And so there is this level of, I'm concerned about that. So I think, I'm grateful that you're having a show like this because I think the community does need to understand that folks aren't like the ones that you're looking at Law and Order. It's a very different experience and the media does make this a lot more difficult than it is because when you get to meet a person like Adryann and many of the other people that come through our doors, they aren't those people in Law and Order. They aren't those people that the media is photographing and talking about. So I think it's important that the community talk about this kind of work and talk about the fact that there's 65 million people who have some sort of criminal record. So think about that, and the statistics you read.
Yeah, there's 2.some-odd million people right now
incarcerated.
And a small minority of them are what you would consider violent felons, people who shouldn't actually be separated from people because they're dangerous. They will harm you. Right. Versus people breaking the law.
Yes, and 95% of those people, the 2.2 million, are coming home.
Right.
And 650,000 come home every year. So if you don't want to think about it as a human, statistic as, I want to be supportive and I want to be helpful, think about it from an economic basis. The more folks could come home who get jobs, they're paying taxes. So that's great for everybody.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, it does go back to the safer communities. And employers also, some employers do take advantage of some of the tax breaks. There's a bunch of different tax breaks that you can get when you do hire an individual who comes out of incarceration.
Did you hear that? Tax breaks.
Tax breaks are important.
We're saying that a couple of times. Tax breaks.
Yeah, so definitely there's some opportunity there. And, many of our participants are vets as well. Not many. There's a number of them who are vets and who have come out and haven't been able to find their footing after being after leaving, their service and somehow end up in a situation where they're incarcerated. And so they're coming home. And so we have veterans who are also looking for work as well. They just also happen to have a record.
So I'm gonna share. I've been in talent acquisition, hiring people for 20 years, and I look at a lot of resumes, and I will get back criminal reports sometimes. And my feeling was that if you were a felon, I was not going to hire you. And I really did not have the mindset of thinking, well, felony means one thing or felony means another thing. It just was in my mind, and I did not need to or feel obliged to expand my thinking about it. And, thankfully, I think in general, I've tried to be open-minded, which is painful to experience, going, well, no, I wasn't really right about that. I wasn't right about a lot of things. And my wife, thankfully, reminds me of all the things I'm wrong about. So so I don't think I'll ever settle on being right about everything. And so now I see, folks who, and I get criminal reports. And for me, my threshold is that, and the truth is in a lot of places I've worked, most felons aren't qualified because they're high technology jobs, they're high skilled jobs. And even from Adriann's experience, people get caught up in this judicial system very young. They don't even get a chance to get a college degree. I wanted to talk about too, I wanted to bookmark, folks who do have an education and are felons. Mm-hmm. But that now, I think, I want my threshold to be 0, right? I do believe in getting rid of the box. I think if someone's qualified, if they went to jail, they went to jail. Mm-hmm. It's really not, it's like if you owed money and you had a debt. You paid the debt. What's the problem?
Exactly.
I think people sometimes forget that our sentencing laws are so strict in this country that the people they're worried about aren't getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
They're just not.
Right.
The people that they sweat about aren't coming home. And,
Say more about that.
Well, it's just, so many of our sentencing laws and so many of the people in prison are there because of drug offenses that are in many cases minor, but they've been jacked up to felony status or whatever the case may be. But the people who hurt people, the people who those folks stay in prison for a long time if they ever get a chance to come home.
Right, but you do hear these edge cases of the person who got out.
Some come out eventually.
There was someone who cut off their security bracelet and then committed crimes. So there's that fear, and fear is quite potent.
Absolutely. But that's, a very small amount of people. And I think that's what I was referring to about the media piece, is that this is what we see, but you don't see people like Adryann or some of the other many individuals who are just fine, who are working every day at the Sugar Shack and all these other places.
And we need to hear these stories.
And you need to hear those stories.
And then the vast majority of people you see being incarcerated, a lot of them haven't been incarcerated before. It's their first crime. It's not like, don't get me wrong, recidivism is recidivism, but most people you see going away, it's the first time they've ever went away. So you wouldn't know they were criminals. And most people you see coming home, the recidivism rate isn't as high as people make it seem. Like when you look at the grand scheme of thing in numbers, it's not as high as they make it seem. Most guys, I know a guy who had a life sentence. He got a commutation. He was down for 25 years. I have seen this guy every day since he's been home over the last year, and all you ever see him doing is looking for a job. He doesn't own a cell phone. He doesn't know how to get on a bus or catch the train, and he walks around the city every day looking for a job. That's all he's trying to do. And that's after 20 years in prison. And I'm not talking about level 1 prisons. I'm talking about maximum security prisons, because he was a lifer. And he was a lifer for, I think, a quarter ounce of cocaine.
I got to say, Adryann, the thing that, breaks my heart is that you are an articulate, bright man. And, we didn't really give you the same opportunities that everyone gets. And that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. I think had you gone to college and not had the felony, you would have had a much more positive experience of working.
No, I thank you. I agree with you. But at the same time, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be at. I don't think it's by accident that I went to prison when I did, and I was released at a time when this topic is such a hot button topic in this country. I think, God just got a way of putting us in the position he wants us to be in, to affect the change he needs us to affect during our time here on this planet. So, I agree with you. Trust me, Lord, I wish it would have been easy. But this road has opened up some doors. I met a lot of great people, like I said, and I don't regret anything I've ever done. I do regret the fact that I haven't had the opportunity to open up more people's eyes, to share more. That's the only thing I say I regret.
I'm sure you'll keep doing that. So, Elizabeth, let's talk quickly about the folks who go to prison who are high-functioning executives or...
Absolutely. So so OAR mostly works with individuals who are reentering who don't have other supports. We have had other cases where an individual was in a banking situation, committed an embezzlement charge, and is no longer able to be in that career. And so that person now has to figure out, so imagine you've been doing 20 years of business in this specific angle, and all of a sudden you're told you can't do that work ever again. So you have to figure out, how are you going to go into a different direction when it comes to a career, a different path. So that's very difficult for many people who have incredible amounts of experience. So we do have that ability to support individuals who are coming home that way. The majority of our folks are people who have very little support outside of that. So if you're thinking of someone who has family support, they definitely have a lot easier, and in most cases don't really come through our doors as much. But including the fact that, Adryann mentioned quickly about cutting hair, there's lots of laws in the state, in the country, but specifically in the state, that if you have a certain type of charge, you're not able to do certain things, including being a barber. So if someone comes out having an incredible talent, you're the best barber, you're the best possible mechanic you possibly can be, but you aren't allowed that opportunity because there's a law in the state that because of the charge you have, you can't actually excel in your job.
Wow. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. How can people get a hold of you if they want to make donations or if they want to support, be a part of your organization?
Yes, we'd love to have people check out our website. So we're at oaronline.org. So that's www.oaronline.org. And we have tours twice a month. They're 1-hour tours at our office to get to know our mission and to learn more about the folks who are coming through our doors.
That's great. So I highly encourage you to give money, give time, give support. The only way this is going to change is if we make the change. And Rob, tell us about your amazing donuts and where one can partake.
We've got 2 locations right now, one in Alexandria at the corner of Madison and Henry Streets, and a second one in Arlington, the corner of Columbia Pike and Glebe. And soon there'll be one in Washington, D.C., very close to the corner of 9th and U Street.
Wonderful. We love supporting local businesses, so go and get yourself a Sugar Shack donut. And Adryann, I am sure someone is listening and wants to give you a job. How do they reach you?
You can reach me at my email address. It's all lowercase, ADRYANN_GLENN @gmail.com. You can reach me through OAR. You can Google me. Any way you want to reach me, please reach me because Adryann wants to work yesterday.
Awesome. So thank you, everyone. This is a really important subject. I hope in the future we cover it again, and if we do, that the news is more positive.
Thank you for having us.
So thank you so much for tuning into You're Hired. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. If you want to reach me, my phone number is 240-876-0276. I love to hear your comments. And if you'd like to be on the show, let me know. You can go to our Mixcloud site. So this show is broadcast on WERA at 10 o'clock in the morning on Mondays, 10 a.m. on Mondays. And then at 11 a.m. on Mondays, we are broadcasting the show on Mixcloud. So that's mixcloud.com, Lorne Epstein, /Lorne Epstein. Thank you again. Have a great time. We'll see you next week on You're Hired.